listening to the Ontario Agronomy Geeks on RealAgriculture.com.
Hello everyone, Bernard Tobin here with RealAgriculture.com for another episode of Agronomy Geeks, the Ontario edition. In this edition, we're going to explore agronomy ideas to help optimize production in a down market in 2015 and share some thoughts on that topic. We're joined by agronomist Deb Campbell from Agronomy Advantage. Welcome to the program, Deb.
Hi, thanks for having me, Bernard.
Awesome. Hey, are you staying warm out there? This is some kind of winter.
It has been, but I see some sun on the horizon and some warmer temperatures, so spring's coming.
Well, I won't ask you when it's coming, but because I wouldn't want to put you on the spot. But hey, let's talk about some agronomy topics. And now you've spent a lot of time out on the meeting circuit this winter talking to farmers, and one of your messages has been that it really is important for farmers to agronomy proof their farms this year. What do you mean by that?
Well, in the scenario that we're looking at here for 2015, I think it's really important to spend maybe a higher priority amount of time on planning and digging through the fundamentals in that agronomy plan, that crop plan, if you will, and making sure that those fundamentals of that plan, your fertility strategy, your weed control strategy, your planting strategy, the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. There really is no room for error when the margins get tighter. And spending that time doing that planning is usually well worth it and leads to the better results at the end of the day for producers, more consistent results.
Right. Now, I want to explore a few of your key ideas. You always kick off your presentations with reflections on 2014. It was a tough year and a late year. And so what can we learn about last year, especially the weather?
Well, the weather always throws its curveballs, positive or negative, and it's important to reflect on that and see what you can actually change in your management plan to adapt to that. And in some cases, the reality is you come back and you say, you know what, 2014 was really just that curveball and we're not changing anything. But I think for a lot of producers, they're reflecting on the maturity of their hybrid selection, the maturity of their soybean selection, and they're also digging into 2 years back-to-back of low acre wheat planting. And, when you have 2 seasons back-to-back with a similar outcome or similar challenges on each one of those, then it's time to maybe look at actioning some changes there. So a lot of discussions this winter around do we or don't we go to earlier maturity hybrids and beans, and how do we get this wheat planted in a timely manner that actually leads to the high-yielding wheat crop that we're looking for. So that's been one of the biggest outcomes of reflecting on 2014.
Yeah. Hey, so let's talk about that impact on planting date and what the impact it can have on soybeans. Tell us about what farmers should be thinking as they approach soybean planting this spring.
Well, we have consistent data from Ontario sources now for time and time again over the last 10, 20, even 30 years telling us earlier planting leads to higher yields. That's a very strong, very consistent message. And as we struggle through plateauing soybean yields, that is the number one step to figure out how do we achieve higher yields. And quite consistently, we're adding 3 to 5 to even 8 bushels by moving planting dates earlier. So that's been a strong message to producers. There's no easy answer for that one, unfortunately, Bernard, but unfortunately, sometimes it means additional resources in that peak time of planting to capitalize on limited planting days. So extra resources in the form of equipment, people. That's not an easy challenge to manage through, but producers are definitely trying to figure that out, going to wider row planting systems that are adaptable between corn and beans so that they can roll from one field to another quicker. So, we're working on figuring that out and how do we plant corn and beans in the same window to capitalize on that.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more about soybeans, but first, let's hear a few words from the folks at Cargill who help bring this show to life every week.
The Ontario Agronomy Geeks is brought to you by the Cargill Expert Network. With nearly 100 years of advising farmers, operations in 65 countries worldwide, and a team of over 100 North American agronomic specialists, your Cargill rep draws from a network of expertise to provide you with the help that you need. Visit asktheexpertnetwork.ca to learn more.
We're back with Deb Campbell. Deb, hey, another big issue, on the soybean front is white mold. What can we learn from last year? And are we learning more about the best management strategy, or is it just a case of a number of factors that we need to keep an eye on?
Well, white mold, as you know, is a multifaceted disease with so many different factors leading towards these outbreaks that we see randomly, maybe every 5 to 7 years. But even at that, some of the management strategies we use for high-yielding soybeans on some of those best farms actually lead to some of the risks that we see for white mold. So things like seeding rates, opening up to wider row beans, those early planting dates sometimes are in conflict with white mold strategies. Having more canopy early is good for yields, but can be a risk for mold. So moving to, but on the flip side of that, though, we have, if we over manage for white mold and have a hot, dry year, we can actually leave yield on the table.
Right.
So it's one of those strategies that you really need to dig into, figure out which farms are high risk for white mold and adapt those strategies. And then, what can we do in season as well in the form of fungicides or whatnot to manage if the season actually brings the environment to the forefront that's going to increase risk as well. So it's multifaceted, and the big challenge for producers, we're looking at a high soybean acre again for soybean planting acre again for 2015. There are going to be soybeans back-to-back in rotation, and producers that are in that scenario really need to have that well-managed strategy for white mold.
Mm-hmm. Deb, talk a little bit about fungicides and I guess maybe the emergence of the key role they can play and have been playing in the last couple of years. I know Dr. Dave Hooker's done a lot of research on fungicides and soybeans.
So fungicides have been adding to our soybean management toolbox, certainly for the last few years. And as we're seeing new fungicides come to the market, we're seeing maybe some more consistency out of the performance of that fungicide in the package. So again, when it comes to white mold, though, we need to be starting from the planting scenario in those row widths and seeding rates, and then keeping that fungicide as your sort of ace in the hole to top it off when conditions are definitely in that high-risk parameter to pull the trigger on fungicides. We are finding that the best outcomes from those fungicides is a two-pass strategy with high rates. So there is certainly an additional cost, but the performance has been quite consistent. We've learned that in 2014 in the white mold scenarios that we saw. The performance of those fungicides is definitely added to the management practice. Mm-hmm. So we want to be evaluating those for sure.
Now, when I think about soybeans, Peter Johnson, our old friend Peter Johnson, always says, hey, think about wheat. And what you do in your management of soybeans is going to impact the success of your wheat crop. Tell us, explore some ideas there about, how to manage that soybean crop so it's also beneficial and sort of helps your wheat management.
Yeah, so going back to the earlier discussion around seeding early in soybeans and how that enhances our soybean yields and production there, that actually allows us a more timely harvest at the back end. So in the data has also shown that if we're pushing heat units, planting early adds more bean yield. We maybe don't always need to do that on those acres that are destined to be planted into wheat. So early planting of soybeans helps us achieve early planting in wheat. That's definitely one factor. We also want to be looking at how we're managing soybeans at harvest to speed up that wheat planting window as well. So looking at residue management from the combine for soybean residue, that we're leaving a good surface application of residue that allows us to no-till that wheat right in following the combine. And also looking at pre-harvest glyphosate, pre-harvest Aragon applications to bring those soybeans to harvest in a timely manner. They don't necessarily speed it up, but quite often producers tell me that they can combine a little bit faster across those fields that have that application on. And again, that just opens up a window, hopefully in the earlier part of the wheat planting window, to get that wheat crop planted.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about corn, the king. And, given the price picture, a lot of farmers are talking about, controlling inputs. And so from your perspective, what do farmers need to think about to maintain or, even increase yields while reducing costs, while, just maintaining control of those costs?
When I look at corn and, for the production scenario we're looking at here for 2015, input prices are up a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, and perhaps the margins are being squeezed on pricing opportunities as well. So in my mind, it comes back to doing the fundamentals of corn planting and corn preparation perfectly, or as close to perfectly as can be achieved. Some of those additional bells and whistles, if you will, don't necessarily add a lot of yield at the end, and they can add significant dollars into the production system. So focusing on your crop rotation ahead of corn, in-season nitrogen management. We've moved nitrogen management into over-the-top or in applications in corn, late June, early July, so that we're sequencing that nitrogen more timely for when the crop needs it. Focusing on planter setup, that we have optimum emergence in that corn crop, early weed control, early planting, things like that, hybrid selection and balanced fertility, all fundamental to corn production. And ultimately, that'll deliver 90 to 95% of our corn yield. Mm-hmm. Some of the other factors, they're good experimentation. There's definitely value there on some high productivity scenarios probably, but focusing on those fundamentals will deliver that corn crop quite well.
Mm-hmm. A final thing I want to talk about, and that is something that's become part of managing cash crops in Ontario and across North America is weed resistance management. And one of the messages you have is, don't forget that focus, because if you don't, manage that issue, it could have big implications for you this year and years down the road.
Well, my message to producers and in the geography that I'm working in, we're just on the cusp of this issue. It's just knocking on our doorstep. So my message to producers that are in that scenario is to have a plan. Have a plan, whether it's scouting, whether it's using some pre-emerge herbicide products to minimize the impact of that right out of the gate. For those producers that have already identified this on their farm, they're in a different scope. They have to be planning for pre-emerge herbicides in soybeans, for example, using conventional herbicides in corn, and actually monitoring fall applications of glyphosate, for example, on wheat stubble to see if there's been escapes there. There's a lot more focus in scouting and planning when it comes to resistance management, and whether you're a producer who's already impacted or a producer who's trying to prevent it, both parties need to be planning for it.
Well, Deb, hey, some great tips today for farmers, and I really appreciate the time, and thanks for joining us today. And I guess for you, you're looking forward to getting out and doing some scouting.
Yes, I think there'll be some priorities on wheat farms this year, Bernard.
Hey, good stuff. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks.